June 2024 Long Haul Pilot Reserve Review. Hello, my name is Darren. I'm a dad. I'm an airline pilot. I'm a husband of a scientist. That's my wife, Kelly. Then you'll see my youngest, Shelby. And then next to me over here is my oldest, Natalie. She hates being on camera. I didn't fly a whole lot in the month of June. I did fly 5 777-200 trips, 2 777-300 trips. I overnighted in Madrid, London, and Rome, and I had one trip to JFK. This will be a quick review of each trip, how much I flew for the month, and of course at the end I'll tell you how much I made. It's a little bit complicated. My first trip was to Madrid. I wanted this trip really bad. I liked Madrid. I went there by myself about a couple years ago for a day. Supposed to leave at 2:10, get there at 6:40 in the morning, sleep until about 10, 11, go and explore the city, leave the next day at 9:20. It didn't happen. We had a mechanical issue leaving Dallas. We left late, really late. We left almost 4 hours late to Madrid, meaning we left at 6 p.m., got there at 10:30 in the morning, really late, right? And then, of course, I slept till about 1:30 in the afternoon, had a couple hours in the city before I had to go back to the hotel to rest for the next day, to fly back the next day. I did get 20 hours credit, 9.5 hours credit there, 10.5 hours credit back, 20 hours total toward my reserve for the month. I mean, I'm long haul reserve. You'll see how it works at the end of the video. Now, my next trip for the month was a trip to, New York City. This was a day trip. I didn't want this trip. This is a junior man trip. They called me and said, "You're going." Deadhead to San Antonio, fly to JFK, and deadhead back. Now, look at the times in this trip. 9:23 arriving in San Antonio, leaving at 10 a.m. Not very realistic, right? And it didn't happen that way. We ended up leaving Dallas a few minutes late to go to San Antonio. So by the time we left, Dallas, we got San Antonio at 9:36. We still left at 10:25. That's pretty quick going from the terminal to a hangar, flying up the airplane. I did fly up there, got my landing in. Got to JFK, and unfortunately we were delayed coming back to DFW, so we had to sit in DFK for 3 hours before getting back to DFW super late that night via Deadhead. The running reserve credit so far is 28 hours and 43 minutes. I got 8 hours and 43 minutes worth of credit toward reserve from that trip alone. The next trip was to London, because of course I go to London, right? I don't like London. I just get sent to London often. It's fine. I've now gone there 6 times now in just a few months. I just explored a new part of the city. So if you know London, you know this is, I think, near the Harry Potter. I call it the Harry Potter stop, Knightsbridge. 3-man, junior man trip again, meaning I was assigned this trip. I didn't pick it. They called me and said, "Hey, you're going to London." 3-day trip. Again, it was fine. Fly there. Got there at a decent time, 8 in the morning. Slept till about 11 o'clock. Explored the city. Nice long overnight, right? The next day, we flew up to Boston. And then from there, I was supposed to overnight in Boston for 19 hours and deadhead home. This is a broken 6-day trip, right? I have no need to stay in Boston. I don't know when in Boston, right? And I don't have to stay there. So instead, I hopped on the next flight to Dallas. Got home a day earlier. In fact, I got home in time to see my Father's Day cake my oldest bought me. Running reserve credit, 49 hours and 53 minutes. Now, while I was waiting in Boston, I did call my boss, my wife, while I was waiting for my flight. Again, FaceTime makes the world smaller and makes it easier on flight crews and our families, as I can call my wife whenever I'm on the ground. And we talk a lot on FaceTime. We probably 2 hours per trip on FaceTime between, not all at once, but in and out over the course of a trip, calling, checking in, talking to the kids, everything else. But there's my Father's Day gift from my oldest. She actually bought with her own money, and she was very excited to give that to me. Again, I work on a credit system here. I get 73 hours of front loaded to my account, so to speak. I'm working toward that 73 hours for the month for my guarantee. I can work less, of course, but we'll see how close I get to it for the whole month. Anyways, my next trip of the month was to Rome, and I wanted this trip. I could have not worked at all. Due to our reserve rules here, I could have sat at home and not worked, but I wanted to work on this reserve block to have a chance of having the end of the month off. That was my whole goal, and it ended up working for me. But Rome, I went to Rome again as a passenger a couple years ago, just for a day. So it's nice to go back to Rome again. I like Rome. Now, this is a long flight, and some people on my airline don't like this flight because of how long it is for a 3-pilot crew. It's about 10.5 hours there and 11 hours and 55 minutes back. Well, with the 3-pilot crew, I'm up front then for almost 8 hours during my shift, which is a long time to be up on front of the airplane. But we left on supposed to leave at 6:35 p.m., get there at 12:15 p.m. nice long overnight. Rome is far, the airport's far from the city, but it's still a long overnight. Leave Rome, come back to DFW, get there at 7:15 at night. It does get back later at night and leaves later in the day, so you can almost count this as a 2-day trip, really, right? Because I'll leave late on day one and I arrive late on day two. So late, in fact, that I can just go home and go to bed and not be that jet lagged. But it was a good trip overall. We actually left early, arrived early, so it's kind of nice to have a longer overnight. But then we left a few minutes late and got here really late. We had no gate when we arrived in Dallas. So I ended the month with 73 hours and 16 minutes worth of total credit on reserve. As a long call pilot, I'm paid 73 hours a month to be available to the airline. If I was short call, it'd be 76 hours a month. And all that means is that they're gonna give me that money, and if they never call me, I still get paid 73 hours. So I kind of broke even this month, right? They pay me 73, I work 73, so there's no advantage to the house or to the player. Once you add in my credit from last month, though, I am over that. So I'm like 80s, you can see the number somewhere, 86 hours or so. So overall, it's a pretty good month. I mean, I still came out ahead in that I didn't have to work every single reserve day, as we'll now see on this calendar. So the green lines are my actual days off. Now you'll notice on the first or the second of the month that NRT, that's when my trip from last month went into this month, June. But beyond that, I worked just the 3-day trips, Thursday, Friday, Saturday for 3 weeks in a row. I did have that one JFK trip on a Monday, but then I had a lot more days off than I would have had otherwise because my strategy actually worked. The 26th through the 30th of the month were actually reserve days, long call reserve days, and they could have called and used me, but I had so much credit built up by that point that they couldn't call me and give me any trip that would keep me under 85 hours. Now, this was strategic, as I said. I had to have minor surgery done on the 25th, and I needed some days to recover, so I actually called in what's called sick if needed. This is where the airline will put me on sick, but only charge me sick time if they needed to use me on those days. Well, because I had so much credit, they couldn't use me, so I was able to be sick for those 5 days and use 0 sick time for the entire duration of my recovery. As far as my credit and compensation for the whole month, well, I had 13 hours and 13 minutes of credit from the previous month. That was the Narita on that first day of the contractual month. I then had 73 hours and 16 minutes worth of credit from June. My total credit being 86 hours and 52 minutes. It doesn't add up perfectly because there's some other weird stuff that's in there. Again, airline pay is complicated. My hourly pay added up to $24,868.45. My per diem is $878.50. My sit time, again, it's a contractual thing, is $85.88. And my international pay, again, it's a thing we have here, is $116.92, bringing my entire June take-home pay of $25,947.75. Now that is excluding the 17% 401k contribution, which I'll put on here, but it's still compensation that I'm getting from my airline. So that was my month of reserve in June 2024. It was pretty easy overall. I'm not going to complain. I had the days off I wanted for the most part. I didn't work every weekend, right? I didn't go to London every week, and I had 0 flights to Charlotte. That's an inside joke if you were a long-time viewer of mine. I was told for years on the narrow body that when I go to the wide body, it's a different airline. And I never understood what that meant. They kept saying, it's a whole different airline. Well, it really is. Quick example, right? On the Airbus, even as a senior first officer, I would probably fly a 3-day trip, right? And it'd be a 3-2-3 trip. 3 days day 1, 2 legs day 2, 3 legs day 3. Well, every flight is a point of failure for the schedule, right? I could be flying Des Moines to Chicago, back to Des Moines, and then to Pensacola for the overnight. Well, if I get to Chicago and I'm running late, and I'm going to be so late, I'm going to miss the flight to Pensacola, well, they're going to have a reserve come out to fly that Pensacola flight and reassign me to go somewhere else, maybe Charlotte, right? And that's every point of failure along your schedule. On the wide body, it's just one flight out, right? It's one flight Des Moines to Chicago, and we're done. Now there are, it's different kind of flying as well. There's a lot, bigger airplane, of course, but there's many more things get ready for a wide body flight than there are a narrow body flight. Small things, possibly small things like a lavatory, right? If we're just flying Des Moines to Chicago, we can get our lavatory dumped, but if we don't get it dumped all the way, it's not a big deal. we're going to Des Moines to London. Well, that's like a 10-hour flight, right? You gotta make sure the tanks are empty and our water tanks are full because we have a much longer process ahead of us. What else? Um, I appreciate the flexibility as also on reserve, right? The sick if needed, I mentioned. If I was an Airbus captain, I can almost guarantee you I would have been used for those 5 days if sick if needed. Why? Because on the wide body in my base, almost every flight is more than 9 hours long. What? And then, of course, the return flight, right? So when I was at 73 hours of flight time, they couldn't really do much with me to send me overseas. But if I was a narrow body captain, they could easily give me an overnight. An overnight is 10 and a half hours credit in the system, right? So they could have had me fly Des Moines to LA and back, and then fly LA to Des Moines the next day over those 2 days. They can even sneak in possibly. No, I can do a 3-day trip still. I can do a 3-day trip, but they could you probably use me narrow body versus wide body. So that was another perk of being wide body versus narrow body. It was a good month. Next month, I'll be on short call reserve. It'll be a very different system. I will have a video about that coming up next. Long call, I had at least 12 hours of notice before a flight. With short call, I'll have fewer than 12 hours of notice before a flight. I have a wrap time. That'll be something new that you might not be familiar with. But that's for next month, and hopefully my next video will be about short call as well. If you have no idea who I am, again, I'm just a guy. I learned how to make videos on my own. I am not the best at it. I do the best I can. I make videos about my career because when I was younger, there was no one I could approach. I had encyclopedias. I'm that old. To learn about how to be an airline pilot and what an airline pilot does. So I just make videos that I think people would be interested in seeing kind of what the non-flying part of the airline pilot stuff is. I won't ever make a video of in-flight stuff, period, point blank, but I'll do the outside of the flight deck kind of stuff. If you have a question, comment, and I'll try to answer it within 7 days. If you have a longer question, you can message me here, probably easier on Instagram. And again, I do respond to you within 7 days. On that same point, I'll never do any kind of sponsored videos or product placement. That's not what I do. I'm not here for the money. I'm just here to get the information out. And that is it. As always, have an absolutely wonderful day, and thank you for stopping by.